So with that, I'd love to introduce Jonathan Gagliardoni, who will be moderating this panel, and I will let him introduce the panelists.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for being here. First off, can everybody see Dan and Lindsay on that side of the room? Can you see them? Let's just all scoot up forward, maybe. We will not fall off the stage. I would appreciate if everybody followed instructions and did the hashtag and tweeted out. Just kidding. So with that, I'd love to welcome everybody to this panel. And I'm going to let these two amazing panelists introduce themselves, and then I'll introduce myself really quick. So Dan, why don't we start with you?
Okay, thank you very much. And I had a great conversation with Lindsay earlier, so I'm really excited to be here. My name is Dan Robles. I'm the Chief Executive Officer and founder of the Integrated Engineering Blockchain Consortium. And we are a validation system for engineers, and we're talking about infrastructure engineers and roads, bridges, highways, and so forth.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Newen, and I'm the Chief Risk Officer for an MIT Media Lab spinout called Stranger Labs. We're in the privacy and identity management space, looking to achieve both privacy and accountability with our proprietary protocol.
And my name is Jonathan Gagliardoni. I'm the co-founder of a blockchain company called Every. We do real estate. We don't do real estate. We do retail. We do retail on blockchain, and also founder of a blockchain event called Token Forum. So with that, we're talking about smart cities. We're talking about how local ecosystems can take care of blockchain or adopt blockchain. So I'll let whoever jumps on this first. How does blockchain even make sense to a local economy, to a local community?
I guess the problem is it doesn't. It's only because that they haven't. They need to know more about it. They need to know, to actually see the same vision that a lot of us do. I'm on the planning board for a city in Washington, and there's so many things that we could put on a blockchain, like the permitting system. Like when you could run a hash of the permit documents for a building, and they can go back to the original server, and then the municipality doesn't have to deal with them anymore.
Yeah.
Or you have the regulating things like signs and dogs and trees, and all these things can be done so much simpler with a distributed ledger than with the actual regulation. So
Right.
Once they see that these opportunities exist and there's somebody out there building these things, I think you have a big influx towards that sector.
Right, totally. Lindsay?
I think the answer to your questions, like most things, right, is it totally depends.
Yeah.
It depends on the use case that you're talking about. It depends on the intellectual property or digital assets that the agency is dealing with. Everything that's, appropriate for the public sector, when you're talking about innovation and keeping things open and transparent, might not necessarily work for agencies like the FBI or NSA, who are really looking to gain economies of scale and efficiency from leveraging this technology. So when you look at the internal use cases from some private agency-specific blockchains and how that can streamline a lot of the internal processes, I'd say it makes complete sense for government to be exploring their options, but they should do so carefully.
Yeah, and that, we talked about there as far as like the FBI or some of these entities that may not want information. Obviously you can do a private blockchain. But do you think that plays any, and I know you have a background working with those agencies, do you think that plays a background in maybe pushing off this technology?
I think that one of the inherent benefits of blockchain technology is its security, right? When you have so much to gain there by thinking through what you could basically achieve by keeping private internal only permission systems or coalition system where it makes sense between interagency initiatives. I don't think you would want to shy away from it, specifically because there are intricacies with how it needs to be implemented. That's going to be so with every sort of technology you come across.
Right. Anything that touches?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things lacking right now in the crypto space is the intrinsic value of these tokens. Intrinsics matter. And there's a lot of different tokens out there, which, again, they're just states of energy. They're states of energy. They're not even matter. The intrinsic value comes when it touches the people, when the people are the ones who generate through their productivity, through their work and the things they do, the ones who generate the value of the tokens.
Yeah.
And that is inherently going to drive towards a public blockchain.
Right.
If you restrain it, you're actually going directly at the heart of restraining value. But if that's what's required and that's what's needed, then there's certainly a use case for it. But intrinsics do matter, and storing value in things like infrastructure values, because society utterly dependent on infrastructure, roads, bridges, highways, clean water, and aircraft and stuff. So these are key areas to store value. Concrete is immutable, don't worry about it. So these are the opportunities that are available to us that I don't think a lot of people are looking at.
Yeah, yeah. And you're talking about like different contracts and so forth. It made me think about, you could essentially have a marriage license be a ERC 721 token, right? Or you could have like your dog license be an ERC 721 token. What do you think about, I think the token element is very important when it comes to blockchain. How do you think the token plays a factor, or a token would play a factor in some sort of local government structure?
Well, one of the things so regulating trees is something that's big now in municipal governments. Now, how do you regulate trees? I mean, this is nuts. City of Edmonds has 1 million trees. You're not going to go and inventory every single tree. But what you can do is each individual could inventory their own trees. And as the tree grows, it creates a token. When you want to cut it down, you could take those tokens and you send them to the city for your permit. And you have the people in the outside areas you can buy and sell from your adjacent neighbor. So you create a game out of it, and this takes the whole business of regulating something like trees completely off the hands of the municipality. And they only have to check up on it when something goes wrong. Otherwise, it's self-regulating. It's self-gaming. The value is intrinsic, and these can be done everywhere. And it's almost silly that it's not being done. So this is one of the things that we'd like to see. We'd like to help people understand and to move forward on.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah, I think where token economies, sort of come into play, you see so much historical proof that this sort of local incentives to keep, the value inside of a particular area, whether it's a university bucks or whether it's for, incentives for patronizing your local merchants. I think that history itself proves that there is so much opportunity in that space that we should be leveraging that.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about that, somewhere in between social media and blockchain, there was this really cool movement of local currencies or co-ops and the Bay Bucks, and they had a big resurgence on these local currencies. And all of a sudden with blockchain, that went away. And it's very discouraging because that was an example of how humans and people build value into the tokens, into the currencies. And then it kind of disappears, but we're starting to see a resurgence of all that old research that was so valid in the early 2000s now becoming tokenized. And now the idea that you would bring people together to form that social fabric, and that social fabric is the thing that creates the money, there's when you start getting into some serious economies of scale. Everybody's better off. You need less services, self-regulating. You don't need government around. I'm very optimistic about what's happening in that arena.
I think it's also going to be the spark that ignites wider adoption, right? Because when you have these concepts and this, constructs be so far away from the average user who might not be as technologically savvy, they're like, why does this matter to me? But when you can bring it home to people's own communities and they start to see these things materialize in their direct circle, their direct sphere of influence, it resonates in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Ideally, these people have zero idea that they're using blockchain. It's just they're getting some sort of representation that might be leveraging blockchain, but according to them, it's just, I don't know, a widget on their phone or a coin, whatever that be. Very cool.
Or I asked my dad to tell him about blockchain. He's like, well, tell me when I can buy groceries with it. And there's a certain amount of wisdom in that. I mean, when can you actually go buy groceries with your Bitcoin? But this is what everybody needs. This is the thing that's going to make it it's going to bring the stability. It's going to bring everything that we're seeing as ideal in a cryptocurrency. And answering that simple question,
Yeah.
When can I buy groceries with it?
And so let's go with that. When can I buy groceries on the blockchain? Or I guess in this context, what would it take, aside from the people in these municipalities or so forth to say yes, but what does it take to get the yes? Or what would it take to get these local governments or local communities or larger governments for that matter to start thinking about this? What's the tipping point?
Well, a money needs to represent human productivity. Otherwise, nobody would work for it, exchange for it. I mean, think about that. So, debt, money is created by debt, which is future productivity, not quite productivity, but future productivity. So the only thing that you need to do is create a token which represents human productivity. And if you're storing value in something like roads, bridges, infrastructure, well, everybody can kind of come to an agreement, to a public consensus, that token represents something that I need and something that I use. And then that's when they're willing to exchange. Mutual reciprocity is the term that we're looking for. And that condition can only come from a token that represents human productivity, reality stuff.
And I'll bring it down to an even more tactical level, as far as how you actually accelerate that economic development. How do you get the momentum within your own community or state municipality? And I think that while the first answer that you're always going to hear is public-private partnerships, right? Work within your government, know the resources and the restrictions that apply there. But a lot of people, are very discouraged by public-private partnerships because of the lack of movement, right? You get mired in bureaucratic red tape.
Yeah.
But I think that in this context, working with your local government while it is at the very, very ground stages to help them craft the policies and the RFIs and the programs that they're going to need to access smaller businesses innovating and doing these things. Government was not put here, local economies, to innovate at the speed of startups, right? There are checks and balances in place for a reason, but the only way that they're going to craft, sane legislation or policies or programs that make sense for the businesses that are innovating is if we work together.
For sure.
Especially municipalities, because they're highly motivated. Municipalities, they're the ones trying to cut funding. They're the ones who are running out of money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not coming from the state can print money, the city, the government can, but the municipalities are the ones who have that economic incentive to save money, to create, get more tax revenue, get less regulation out there, because everybody wants them to regulate, but those are unfunded mandates, and they're just stretched so thin. If you deliver a proposition, and that's where everything happens, really. Municipal governments is where the world turns, okay? It's where the rubber meets the road, and if you give them an opportunity to save money, they're going to take it.
Mm-hmm. How much time do we have left? This is not working very well. 5 minutes? Okay, so with that, let's open up to questions. 7 minutes. Well, I'll open up questions anyway because I already said so. Go ahead. If you're loud enough, either way.
Okay, so what are the primary two growth drivers in local economy that benefit from blockchain strategy, if that makes sense?
Can you state that one more time, please?
Okay, what are the primary two growth drivers, like in a local economy, that you've observed over your experience that have a deep link to the blockchain technology or technologies? If that makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense.
Thank
I
you.
think if I could restate it, is just what are some of the most fitting or the best use cases, in our opinion, right, that can be achieved by leveraging blockchain? Is that kind of where you were going with that? Little, okay. Specifically within the public sector, I'd say supply chain is a really, really easy, beautiful, natural fit for the blockchain. Anybody who's dealt with government procurement or acquisitions knows how absolutely unpleasant it can be. So implementing transparency there, where you have very, very well-established criteria for a process like that, and just automating it, you save the government millions upon millions of dollars, and then man hours as well, right? So it goes back to what Dan was saying. Present the value proposition where, you understand the government is, can clearly benefit from this. propose it, and I think 9 times out of 10 it'll work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I see 2 vectors for blockchain. One is the mechanization principle. It's like, typewriters went out of fashion because technology mechanized. And I call that like culling the back office. You could get rid of a lot of labor. The other vector is things that could never have been done before but can be done now. And those, what we're using blockchain for is like a moving background. So instead of like a part going down an assembly line and each part has this big stack of paperwork that grows, you've got this moving background and you just throw your data up onto the background, and at the end you computationally reconcile everything. That's just enormous. I mean, you can get things to associate with each other that you would never be able to associate before because you've got a time function. And that time function is a mathematical principle that allows you to calculate quantitative analysis, the calculus, the risk management, all these things you can now apply to day-to-day correlations that just could never be done before. I don't want to go too more into that because we don't have time, but that's where I see the 2.
Sure. So let's say the Department of Agriculture is going through a massive upgrade of all of their systems. They need all new, computers, monitors, everything else. Well, when you look at it just on the security end of that, there are only certain vendors that the government can purchase from, right? And there are certain checks and balances from the manufacturing plant to the time it gets to the agency's door that need to be done to make sure that there was nothing tampered with, that it came from the manufacturers that were approved previously, and then you have that money trail to make sure that what was spent within the allowances that the government was budgeted for that particular program, right? So all of these things, like I said, that are now being done by paper-based systems are checked by humans could really, really be automated and save us a lot of time, embed a lot of security, and reduce a lot of risk.
So anybody who's looked at the statistics, particularly over the last 10 to 20 years, knows that very simply, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Part of that is that most of the great investments are simply not available to anybody that's not a qualified investor, et cetera. Where I'm going with this is that, do you see applications with blockchain or security tokenization where we can allow or enable more people within certain neighborhoods to take advantage of the inherent value of the real estate that's there and be able to participate when that neighborhood improves or something goes in, instead of it simply being a bunch of rich developers or others who are able to do that, and then what ends up happening is the local people are not able to take advantage or have their boats raised, so to say, by that rising tide.
Now, you bring up a beautiful point, and this is the area, honestly, I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but the non-currency based applications and how we stimulate the economy through really grassroots efforts, keeping the value within certain communities and making it fair across the board and more equitable is the thing that really has gotten me excited about blockchain, right? And there's a company out of Chicago called Urban Array that's basically doing this right now. The founder has a real estate background. They already have plots of land, and they're looking at the blockchain's promise to be able to prevent or minimize gentrification, doing some great work in it already. So I think that, just recognizing, spotlighting the people who are actually doing things already in this space is going to go a long way to showing people that there are options for them to invest in beyond, the next shitcoin.
Yeah, I kind of want to touch on that. Sorry.
Can I answer that question?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great topic because we both converged on this in our conversation. We kind of did a fist bump on it because, what we're doing is we're tokenizing risk or the mitigation of risk. So if you're doing something like that, a community that needs more help has more risk, which is a higher probability of generating tokens. So the probability of generating this new token in an area where there's the highest risk now motivates investment to go to that area. Right now, you're confined to, squeezing that last nanosecond out of that computer when you could just generate an enormous amount of tokens by cleaning the water in Flint, Michigan, or by DC. And that's how we can measure things that could never, ever be measured before. We can now do with the blockchain. So that makes it really exciting.
Yeah, I think I just want to touch two things on that. So it's a beautiful idea. I don't think that's ever going to happen with government, unfortunately, being involved. It's going to be like organizations like you're talking about. I personally, it's my own belief, I don't think there should be retail investors in some of those types of projects, right? Because that's definitely a situation where I could see people investing in something that they probably shouldn't. But in a nonprofit type scenario where someone comes in and it's giving back to that community as a result of how people build into the community or give back to the community, and you're earning points or tokens based off of the value you're generating and creating, I think that's a very interesting thing. So we're over time. With that, thank you everybody so much for coming here and listening to Lindsay and Dan. Let's give them a round of applause. And we'll be outside if anybody has any questions or wants to talk further.